Welcome to VezaTalks podcast. My name is Mario Milanovic, and today it's a great pleasure to welcome back John Chappelear. Thanks for being back.
Oh, Mario, thank you very much for having me back. And I, I appreciate your patience going through all the joyful technology glitches that can come up, even though we're probably both on these kinds of events a couple times a week. But it always seems to be when you need it right away.
We had a really good podcast last time, and it was a really, really good response to it, and a lot of clips and reels on social media and everything. So that was really cool. So we didn't really finish off everything we wanted to talk about. We could probably talk for hours on end. However, one thing that I wanted to talk to you about is about your new book that you wrote. So let's dive into that, and you can tell our viewers the name and a little bit of an introduction, and then we can talk about some points, if you don't mind.
No, I'm happy to do that. The two book, it's actually a new book is a more in-depth explanation of the primary book, which the new book is called People Come First. And
Okay.
it talks about the new business model where, which is basically the same business model I've been using since the 80s, but people still don't seem to get it, which is you focus on your people, the business will take care of itself. But if you focus on the business, the people will matriculate directly out the door. The problem is with people who are good is they have choices and they will leave if they're not feeling as if they're being treated effectively. And the ones who don't have choices will stay. So eventually what you'll end up with is a whole bunch of employees that you just as soon not have because all the good ones have already left. So we have to really learn that it is people, not profits. And a good example that's going on right now is the way in which you see large companies, very profitable companies, laying off a lot of people where they may or may not. I mean, I don't look at their balance sheets, but unless they're doing poorly, and I'm not assuming that people like Amazon or other companies that I'm seeing out there right now, Google, that kind of thing, should be making enough. Because what happens is when that happens, the other people begin to feel very concerned about, am I next? Am I
Right.
next? And I
Exactly.
guess I guarantee you a person who wonders whether they're next is not working at the level that a person who doesn't worry about that would be working. So the People Come First is the book that's probably only been out about 2 months, but it was based on the original book, which is The Daily Six. The Daily Six came out in 2006, and I think it was just a little ahead of its time because the concepts of emotional connection with leadership learning how to create an emotional connection with their workers was something that people, I'm not doing that. That's way too complicated. And it really is. It's much more, it takes a lot more responsibility and focus to be able to be emotionally connected. The idea that they
Right.
talk about now is diversity, inclusion, and equity. Those are all based on emotional connections that you can work on to make with the people that you work with. But
Right.
it takes a lot more work to do that than it is just to be a boss, just to tell people what to do and then go back and close your door and sit in your office. I
Right.
mean,
It appears
being
that Elon Musk is kind of on the forefront of this, and it's like he realized that 80% of the Twitter employees were not needed. In other words,
mm,
he's cutting the fat, and that's not something that I think companies did in a long time. Add AI to the whole equation, and you're starting to look at companies, or at least the leadership is looking at their companies and looking and saying, wait a second, we've had all these inclusion mandates and everything else, and our ability to produce whatever we're producing in terms of quality has fallen. Why? Because as you get bigger and fatter, you obviously lose some resilience, and you're not able to move
mm,
as quickly. And so I think the fact that Amazon is and all the other ones are laying people off is really a function of somebody is actually looking at the people that are working there and what they're actually doing, right? Because especially with COVID-19 and everything, a lot of people went home, and I mean, I know so many people that just basically worked for a couple hours a day, right? They would get up at stand-up call 9 a.m. and then go back to bed until 11 and all that. So I think there's a lot of that was happening. But I do agree with you. In an organization where you think you're next, you're basically not going to perform at the highest level. So what do you think is the right approach? I mean, obviously there's a balance, and the balance is, for myself, anytime I had employees, I always really wanted to take care of them and make sure that they're happy and they're taken care of. However, at some point you lose the reins, so to speak, because you're either growing too quick or you don't have the time to spend and maximize each employee's ability to work at a peak, right? So what are some of the things that you, I imagine, have probably written about in this book?
Well, the things that are dealt with in the Daily Six were created primarily to sort of help executives learn that there's an emotional balance that helps keep us centered and balanced in here, which allows us to show up on phone calls and in meetings and in department head, exchanges, where if you're centered and balanced in here, what comes out of your mouth doesn't tend to get you in more trouble than you had before you started talking. Right. So I've taught executives to do this. Just take 5 seconds or 10 seconds before you pick up a telephone. How would you like to be perceived on the phone call? How would you like to be perceived in the meeting? Not what do you want to say, but how would you like people to perceive you? As an irrational, crazy person, or as somebody who really understands what the issues are and is helping to work towards a solution versus just demeaning or demoralizing the staff sitting at the table? And while I do agree that as organizations get bigger, I mean, I had an organization that grew from 2 people to 500 people over a period of probably 5 or 6 years. And then we stayed at about that for a couple of years, and then we cut back some. What I've learned over time is that there are 2 things. One is I wasn't hiring correctly. I was just hiring to fill a spot. And what happens is that means that the person may or may not be capable of doing the job. I'm just trying to, we just need another, whatever it is, another accountant, give me another driver,
Sure.
give me another, and so what happens then is if you don't take the time it takes to get the right person, you tend to end up, you hired that person and they didn't quite do everything. So you have to go hire another person to finish the job. And so what you've done is you've not had a fat problem, you've had a bad hiring problem. And so what we do is we tend to look at the easiest solution, which is just hire another person versus going back and saying, why do we need another person? Why? And so that's sort of the issue that I never dealt with, which was just, what do we need? Fix it. Versus why do we need it? Fix it. I'll give you a great example. We have, at least in my humble opinion, it's a great example. What we had at one point, I had a large distribution company, and we were having troubles with the fact that we noticed that the drivers were spending more time picking up materials that were incorrect. And we had, 40,000 SKUs. So there were lots of times where things were, mispicked or whatever the problem might be. So returns were normal. This happened to be something where the returns were going through the roof and we couldn't figure out why. And so my warehouse distribution people came and said, we need to get 5 more trucks and 5 more drivers, or we're not going to be able to make our commitment to the customer, which is to deliver the next day. And of course, I'm sitting, nowhere near the warehouse distribution center. So I'm like, okay, well, then let's consider that. But why don't we take a look at why this is happening instead of what's happening? And so when we took a look at why is it happening, we realized that we are putting so much pressure on the pickers and packers to put the orders in boxes. I mean, we had a very similar but much smaller version of what Amazon does. We had guys roaming the floors all the time, picking items and putting them in boxes and getting them ready to be shipped out. But we had so much pressure on them that they were picking the wrong items. And it was a much less sophisticated computer-driven warehousing system than they have today. I mean, this was in the mid-'80s. So it was really what was written on the paper and what was written on the shelf had to match. And so they were just picking so fast to keep the quotas up that they were making mistakes. And
Right.
so instead of hiring 5 drivers and 5 trucks, which was very expensive, we hired 3 more pickers and we told them to slow down, don't feed and we changed their quotas from being driven to how many do you pick as to how many returns does your picking create.
Right.
And all of a sudden, the returns went away immediately because we were rewarding on the right things. We hired the right people, not the wrong people. Because if we had had 5 more trucks and 5 more drivers, there would have been the same amount of returns coming back. It just would have been spread out over 5 more trucks. So it's a matter of identifying what the issue is. And that's one of the reasons why I say people come first. And the Daily Six talks about making sure that you don't carry the resentment. I had to work with the warehousing management who were very upset about the pickers and packers. But it wasn't because they were inadequate or poorly trained. It was that we had set an expectation on them that was unrealistic. So if you want to talk about something that motivates or demotivates people, the one thing that has consistently, for years and years, motivated people more than not is clear, achievable goals, not unachievable goals. It's something that's out here that causes you to stretch, but it is reachable. If it's constantly not reachable, all you're doing is creating frustration.
So what do you say to, the people come first, which I agree. What do you say to the AI robot about people come first? And in other words, I'll give you an example in my real life, and that is, I remember my CTO came to me and said, listen, we're doing these crazy volumes right now. And in the digital space, and we need to hire people. And I said to him, okay, is it possible not to hire these people and replace them with, CPUs? And his immediate answer was, no, we can't. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you 2 days. And how many people do we need to hire? 4? Okay. I'll give you 2 days. If you can figure it out, I will increase your salary by 50%. And he came back in 1 day. And he said, yeah, it can be done. We're going to have to get 27 more CPUs, and thanks for the raise. And I said, well done. So what do you say to the AI robot that basically doesn't care about the people and cares about the efficiency of the company, which in itself, the company itself should really care about the company. However, there's this line of, we have employees and we should take care of them, right? What do you say to the robot?
Well, first of all, I can't say much to the robot because I actually I picked a few things with my chatbot, and things like, write me a short post about love and forgiveness. And 30 seconds later, this really nice 300-word post just comes rolling out of the computer. And I have a very hard time saying, well, that doesn't look like a human wrote it, because it does look like a human wrote it. It actually looks like I wrote it. So, the thing is, it's not so much the people or the not people. I mean, these are people you did not hire, you did not mistreat, and you did not cause them to be demoralized and want to quit. These are people that you never hired. So it's, to me, the people that would then come first in that scenario would be the guy you gave the raise to. That would be the person. At that point, that's the person that needs to come first, because he'll be the one connecting to your clients, connecting through the AI robot. So it's always a matter of people feel comfortable buying from and working with people they feel comfortable with. And that's beginning to move into the digital realm. There's no doubt about it. But somewhere along the line, and hopefully, I won't be working a whole lot longer, but hopefully before I retire, I would imagine that many of, the guy who bought those CPUs for you will also be replaced by an AI, and you will be typing into your chatbot some sort of find me 12 more chatbots that can take care of my stuff, and it'll be fixed by the next day, which is a frightening concept, because I don't know what all the people are going to do with all this free time. It's we don't have, at least in the US, we don't have social systems which will support people who get laid off because they got replaced with technology. So I don't know if we're going to have a huge unemployment issue associated with this, or what it may bring, but I do know that there's always going to be somebody, at least I cannot imagine an organization running exclusively on electronics unless you go back to the Matrix. there's going to be a human in there somewhere. And so what we need to make sure is that there's a set of values that get input or guided by the humans that get input and guided by the AI process too.
Right.
So that there's a value associated with what they're doing, and there's a sense of, as Covey used to put it, true north principles that just never get violated. This is
Right.
the way in which we want to behave. This is the model that we want to follow. And as long as that's as long as that's happening, I think that if you have less humans, that's okay. It's just they need to be respected and appreciated, because then they will guide your AI to
Right.
better perform.
So I have a question for you. So just came up to me. So one of the challenges that I think U.S. companies have, and probably Western companies, is the whole call it the woke movement. And it feels, and for us, our company, we know we're international, and so we see the differences in people and the ability to talk to people, what I consider a normal way. And then the challenges that these companies in the U.S. have with, this inability to communicate the way that I guess we used to communicate, and almost like walking on eggshells, right? Can you speak about your experience on that? Because it's a really interesting concept for me, especially because, the people that we hire out of Europe, out of Eastern Europe, and, some people in Asia and Middle East and all that. So can you speak a little bit about that in particular, and how that handicaps the either the entrepreneur or the owner or HR?
Sure. I guess for me, I grew up in Washington, D.C., which is a very big mixing pot of race, creed, color, national origin, all sorts of things. I mean,
Yep.
There was a huge influx of foreign, or not really foreign, but I mean, people from different countries,
Sure.
because of all the embassies and all the people that came with the embassies and all the newspapers that were headquartered in Washington and all these other things. So I kind of grew up with this woke culture, except for the fact that I was white and I was living even unconsciously in primarily a white area. I went to primarily white luncheons. I had a primarily white country club, because it was just the way it was. I mean, it wasn't that I really noticed it one way or the other.
Sure.
And so, but I went through a leadership program in Washington way back in the 80s. And I was born and raised in the city of Washington, grew up in the city, about 12 blocks from the Capitol. And I was never exposed to upper middle class, upper middle class people of racial diversity or sexual orientation. I did not have a lot of gay friends. I had no lesbian friends. I had no really close black friends or even Asian friends or anything else really outside of an old white guy. I mean,
Right.
I was the perfect example of the WASP. But it wasn't until I got to know these people over a 1-year-long program that I realized I've really been off base on this. And I think this is what happens with this woke, not woke kind of thing. It's, I remember my father was a non-denominational bigot. I mean, he didn't like anybody. It didn't matter. For you, it'd be, well, he's Eastern European. I can't deal with those.
Sure.
It wouldn't matter if you're white. If you were white, then there's something else that he doesn't like. Or if you're black, there's something, So what happened that I finally noticed when I was a young teenager was that he was like this, except for the people that he knew. He was very leery of Jewish people, but except for his lawyer and the 3 or 4 friends that he had that were Jewish, they were great people. But all the people he didn't know, there was a problem. Same thing
Sure.
with African American people. The 5 or 6 people that he worked with or knew with, they were just fantastic. Salt of the earth. Except for all these other people that I really don't know. And it wasn't until I came to the realization that he loved all the people that he knew, and he just didn't love the people that he didn't know. So my issue with this today is that most of the problems are coming from a level of a lack of understanding. And it's a very difficult thing for people who have never really experienced this kind of discrimination to understand what it feels like. It's like me trying to, I can imagine what it feels like to have a child, but I can't tell you I understand what it feels like to have a child because I've never had a child. I've never gone through the process of birth. So when I listen to a woman describe the process of birth, I don't discount it. I appreciate it and I validate it because that's somebody who's actually experienced it telling me how it feels. For me to go, well, that's just not realistic. I think you're overblowing the whole thing. Nobody would question me doing that, but yet they question people of different races and different nationalities or different sexual orientations about the issues that they're struggling with. So my thinking is what we need, and again, this is the same thing with emotional connection with leadership. Leadership needs to understand if you want to have people who are, working for you or working with you, or people that you're trying to get to do volunteer work together, working together in a way in which is successful and productive, that you need to be able to understand, at least on some level, the people that you're connecting with. What are they struggling with? Not what is my perspective of their problems. That's not a realistic expectation. What can I, or how many times have I asked them, what issues are you dealing with that I might be able to help you find a way to get from here to there more effectively?
Right.
So
that's a really good answer. I like it.
It's mostly a matter of being willing to expose yourself honestly to your own discrimination, whether or not you meant to do it or didn't mean to do it, doesn't really matter. It matters that you work hard enough to begin to understand the process from the other person's point of view.
Right, got it. So what would you say to Steve Jobs if he was sitting here, who notoriously, you like that, huh? Who notoriously was known to be an a-hole and basically didn't care about people at all, and yet he took a company from basically bankruptcy to the biggest company in the world. So like, what do you think you could tell him, and how would you be able to change his mind if in fact that's something that you would want to do?
Well, no, I wouldn't want to change it. There are some things. I mean, I agree, but the problem is that you've picked a unique situation. It's to be the same thing about Musk. You were talking about Musk earlier. I mean, yeah, let me sit down with Musk and change his mind about all this other stuff about Twitter and all the other things. That's not going to happen because these people are geniuses on one level, which causes them to be socially disconnected on another level. Because, and I can assure you that when I was younger and running companies, there was a level of omnipotence that I felt that had to do with my intellect, my success, and the more success you have, the more intellect you think you have. And so I know a lot of very wealthy people who are just don't get it, and they don't get it because they don't want to get it. It's it's like, why do I need to listen to this? I have managed to succeed in all these other realms of the world, and you're there nagging on me about whether I should say, call them her or him or they or them, because it's just an odd situation. Now, you give me 2 or 3 people down in Apple, I could probably talk to them.
Right. So who would be your demographic for this book? Who is the perfect reader, you think?
Well, for the Daily Six, the perfect reader is the person that was like me, because that's when I wrote the book about 20 years after I sold my largest company and about 10 years after I sold my last company. And it was really for this entrepreneurial, fast growth person that was mistaking success with significance. They were very successful, but the kids just didn't really like them too much because they never saw them. And the wife was like, yeah, well, maybe we'll just get a divorce because I can't deal with much more of this. Because that's what happened to me. I ended up divorced. My kids didn't like me. I was very successful. I was on every A-list invitation in the city of Washington, but I was living in a hotel and my personal life was totally in the dumper, but I looked good. I had a nice suit, a great looking thing. So, the idea is that if you find yourself feeling as if you're doing the best you can, but you're constantly pushing a rock up a hill that keeps rolling back down, sort of the Sisyphus syndrome, you know, then maybe you need to find a different way. Because what happened with me was I got what I refer to as a gift of devastation. And a gift of devastation is those horrible things that happen to you, but eventually push good change into your life. A heart attack pushes exercise and good diet. You know,
Yep.
bankruptcy pushes financial management effectively. Divorce creates a really good parent every other weekend. But what I tell people is that it doesn't require that pain or those traumas to make those changes. You can be a good parent before you get a divorce. It's just that humans have a very hard time making changes unless there's pain associated with it. So, you know, if you've gone through this, and you may have gone through this yourself. I mean, you end up with a company sort of crashing and burning, and so you've changed it. When you start another company, you change the way you ran it, or you change the model in which you built it. If you get remarried, you become a different kind of husband or a different kind of parent, and you change the way in which you work. If you were sort of alienating your people before, and that's caused a huge rift in your life, then you find yourself being different, or you find yourself being willing to learn how to be different. That was what it was for me. It was sort of this shell of hubris that was all around me. You know, it was all about me that kind of got cracked a little bit and allowed a little humility to come in. And I began to realize that the earth does not revolve around me. Just because I'm very successful and there's money involved and all these other things, the world does not revolve around me. You know,
Sure.
There are people out there, and we say things like, well, I'm just really lucky, you know, and the thing is, no, not really. There are a lot of people out here who are doing the same thing you're doing, but not as successful. Or I just really worked hard, you know, and I know people who are working 3 jobs right now, but they're not driving around in a new Porsche. You know, it's just, so what is it? It's right time, right place, a lot of luck, and in many cases, right race, right nationality, those kinds of things all sort of fit together to have put this package together to allow me to be successful, which is why gratitude is a big part of the Daily Six, and a big component of People Come First is learning to be grateful instead of proud. One of the exercises I put people through in a workshop is list the top 5 things that you're proud of, and then go back and change the word proud to the word grateful. And you'll find yourself feeling differently about being proud to have kids versus being grateful to have kids, or being proud of my marriage, being grateful to be married, or proud of my job, or being grateful for my job. The way in which we change the way we look at things allows us to change the way that we appreciate things. And I truly do not believe that you appreciate the things that you work hard for. I mean, many people do, but I know I worked very hard for 25 or 30 years, and nothing that I did had much appreciation. All I wanted was whatever came next. There wasn't any time here to spend time appreciating this. I was always busy looking, you know, where are we going next? How much bigger can I be?
Sure.
So I wasn't living a life. I was living a marketing plan. You know,
Right.
it had to
Absolutely.
be 20% bigger every year.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, the only reason we do anything, and that's anything, whether it's a new car, a new job, pushing more money, new women, is to feel better. That's the only reason we do anything like that. And, you know, I always advise my clients that I deal with is that, well, why don't you just feel better now, and then everything else is a bonus, right?
Right.
And they will,
Right.
well, that's a good point. Exactly. So that goes back to words appreciation, and that goes to appreciating the moment and living in the moment and allowing things to happen in your life, because so many times we want to control things and we think we can control them, and at the end of the day there's absolutely nothing you can control except the way you feel. So, you know, it's really interesting to see you know, people hustling, wanting to make millions and millions, and then when they make the millions they want to make more million. It never ends. So it's an ego
Right.
ploy that for some reason doesn't hit you until you really get you know
It's
pinned
too
by
late.
buildings, you know, and you have your
Right.
you know, major catastrophe in your life, right? And then you reevaluate it, and then you forget about it a couple of years later, right? So it's yeah, it's super important to be grateful, and a lot of times being grateful is almost associated in a religious sense, and so people don't like it, I suppose. And I think that being great, and you know, when you talk about families, maybe different, right? I'm grateful for my mom, my dad. I'm grateful for my kids. I'm grateful for something, right? And so as soon as you say that, it changes the way you feel. It's
Right?
amazing, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It really is. I mean, that's the concepts in the Daily Six. There, each one of those is something that will lead you. You talked about, I want to feel better, or I want to be happy. You know, that was sort of my thing, was happy. Let me feel happy. And I did so many successful things, but they didn't connect me to happiness because
Right.
there was always another hurdle. You know, it was that, as soon as I get this done, then I can work on that. And as soon as this happens, then I can work on that. And so the phrase I've coined is stop waiting for your life to get perfect to be happy. And then the other thing is that, okay, well, now I'm willing to do that, but what does that mean? What is that? So the Daily Six was willing. You had to be willing to start, and then spend some daily quiet time to set your heart and your mind in the right direction, so that you've created a path for the day. Be focused to service with others, so focusing on the needs and successes of others, not just my own. Be practicing love and forgiveness, which is just understanding other people's needs and treating them as important as my own, not more important and not less important, just as important. Being forgiving, so you're not carrying around a lot of judgment and anger from day to day to day. Gratitude for all things at all times, and take action on each of those components, because the rest of them, if you don't take any action, it's just a mental activity that you go through thinking you're really getting a lot of things done. But
Right.
it's funny how the one thing that I've learned with this particular step is that a lot of times I look at executives and they go, this is the instruction book. This is what I've been looking for, is, okay, what do I do tomorrow when I wake up? Well, you think about what you're going to be willing to work on today. You're going to work on being a little more loving, and work on a little meditation or mindfulness or gratitude, or what are you going to work on? It doesn't have to be something you incorporate all of this stuff together all the time. Just focus on moving yourself a little forward. Small steps, small changes create dramatic results. So let's get a small step started tomorrow.
Absolutely. Well, that's amazing. So, as you know, I always ask my guests about being in my shoes, and not having asked a question, what would that question be? I think last time you asked me whether you're happy, I believe. And so is there a question that you felt I didn't ask you?
Um, what am I doing today to maintain that level of happiness and appreciation and gratitude?
Okay, cool.
And for me, it's turned out to be a very weird thing, um, which is, I mean, we've talked enough times, that that's not so unusual if it's a weird thing and it happens to me.
I like
I've
weird. It's good.
started, I've got, I live in a very nice neighborhood where everybody takes care of their yard and everything is trimmed up nicely. But I have a very old man who lives next door, who's almost completely disabled and really can't afford any yard help or yard care. And a couple that lives right across the street from him, a brother and a sister, who are really struggling just to make ends meet. And so what I've done over the last few weeks is I've started mowing their lawns. I have a riding mower, and so I just drive it over there and go around, mow the lawns. And I pay somebody to mow my lawn, and I'm mowing somebody else's lawn. This is the craziest thing. I mean, I'm the only guy that mows lawns that pays to have somebody mow mine. So, but I get a tremendous sense of satisfaction out of seeing
Absolutely.
the satisfaction. The woman across the street, of the brother and the sister, she came over the other day and talked to Susan, my wife, and said, we need to be able to do, what can we do for John? I mean, and she said, please don't worry about that, because that just gives him a sense of value in being able to help you. It makes
Absolutely.
him, he's getting a great deal of value out of this helping, and so for me, it's silly little things like mow a lawn or hold a door or push a
Sure.
shopping cart back, or something else, that's some small thing that I can do to sort of make a little dent in the day that shows that I was here.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, that's really, really amazing advice. Tell everybody about the book name again and where they can buy it.
The book is, there are two books. One is The Daily Six, and the other is People Come First. And The Daily Six and People Come First are both available on Amazon. There's also another channel called Scribble, Scribl, and
Okay.
Scribble has an ebook and an audiobook. So I've had a very hard time getting Amazon to be willing to take somebody else's version of my audiobook. They're not real big on that. If you want an audiobook, it's got to go through Audible. So it's a little hard to get them to do that. But Scribble is a great place, especially if you're an author. If you're an author, it's a really good place to go because you get about 80% of the sales profit. So it's
amazing. Well, that's great.
Much better deal than Amazon.
Great, excellent. Well, thank you again for your time. This was wonderful, and I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
Thank you, Mario. It's wonderful to see you again. Take care.